I didn't scream when they drove away. I was too stunned, too afraid that if I opened my mouth I'd never stop screaming. The ER doors were less than 20 feet away. But my legs wouldn't move. The pain had returned, deep pulling like someone wringing my insides. Behind me the taillights disappeared down the slope. My mother's voice still rang in my ears. "You made this choice. Live with it." A gust of wind lifted the hem of my maternity dress. I clutched my belly with one hand, the overnight bag with the other. The concrete under my sandals was hot from the afternoon sun. I was 9 months pregnant. In active labor. Alone. It wasn't just the pain that made me shake. It was the betrayal. The way their car slowed. Just enough for me to step out, then sped away again. My own parents. For weeks, I'd told myself they just needed time. That once they saw the baby, once they held her, they'd come around. But when the moment came, they chose silence. They chose shame over their daughter. Why did I go back to their house that weekend? Why did I still hope the hospital doors opened automatically when I got close enough? But no one stood behind the front desk. I sank to the nearest bench, breath short, lower back throbbing. The waiting room smelled like disinfectant and stale coffee. A baby cried in the distance. Another contraction hit, and I doubled over, fingers digging into the vinyl seat. Would they have left Lucia like this? Of course not. Lucia had a husband. She had done it the right way. I heard footsteps, slow, steady, approaching from the hallway. A woman in scrubs with silver streaks in her bun and eyes full of concern knelt beside me. "Are you in labor, honey?" My mouth trembled. "Yes." She didn't flinch. She pressed a cool hand to my arm. "Let's get you inside." And just like that, someone stayed. Would you ever forgive your family for leaving you like that? Or would you rewrite your story one choice at a time? Tell me. Where are you listening from? Have you ever felt like someone erased you? Right when you needed them most? The last time I sat at that dining table, I tried not to cry over green beans. They were overcooked, mushy, and bland, and I'd brought them. My mother made a face but said nothing. She passed them to my sister without comment, then complimented Lucia's casserole for the third time. It was Memorial Day weekend, and I'd come home hoping for something, anything. A word of support. A moment of warmth. But the table was already full with judgments, silence, and tension so thick you could spread it like butter. Lucia's boys were running around in the backyard. Her husband Jeff was showing Dad pictures of the new SUV. I sat quietly between the coleslaw and my cold coffee, my belly resting heavy against the table edge. No one asked how I was feeling. No one mentioned the due date. Mom wore her usual red lipstick, the one she reapplies even between courses. Her earrings matched her serving spoons. Everything polished, everything in order. Except for me. "You look tired, Monica," she said finally, not unkindly but not kindly either. "Maybe you should take it easy." That's what women with husbands do when they're expecting. Lucia didn't look up. She didn't need to. She knew exactly where this was going. "I've been on modified duty since week 34. I answered, trying to keep my tone neutral. "Just light scanning. No lifting." Mom nodded but said nothing. It wasn't the work she was judging. It was everything else. I had chosen to get pregnant alone. After years of disappointing dates, false hope, and fertility appointments, I decided to stop waiting for permission. I chose a donor. I chose myself. I still remember the clinic waiting room magazines from 2015, the buzz of fluorescent lights. The moment the nurse said, "You're pregnant," I laughed through tears. But when I told my parents 2 months later, the room had fallen colder than that clinic ever was. Mom stared at the ultrasound printout like it was something indecent. Dad left the room. "Why would you bring a child into the world like this?" Her voice was flat. "You don't even have a husband. What will people think? I have a stable job. Health insurance. A nursery already started." I listed my credentials like a resume, but nothing pierced the silence. Lucia called me later that week. She said she was processing, that this was a lot. I haven't heard her say the baby's name once. Clara. I had picked it before I even conceived. Short, strong, timeless. Dad never responded to the email with the ultrasound video. Mom removed me from our group text thread after I shared a picture from my second trimester. It had been months of silence. Until Memorial Day weekend. I had thought. Maybe. The invitation was indirect. Lucia's husband Jeff had texted me about helping with the grill. I offered to bring something. No one said yes or no, so I showed up with the green beans. I was 39 weeks and 2 days pregnant. I didn't drive much at that point, but I made the trip. My childhood rooms still had the same curtains. My old twin bed the same creaky floorboard under the dresser. They hadn't touched it not even after I moved out at 22, but the guest towels were folded neatly. A scented candle I left years ago still sat unlit on the nightstand. That night as I lay awake, I heard them talking downstairs. Lucia's voice sharp, whispering. Then Mom, she chose this. She wants attention. I won't coddle it. Coddle it. I placed my hand on my belly, feeling the slight shift inside. Clara kicked gently. Like she was asking, are we okay? The next morning was warm. New Mexico sunshine filtered through the kitchen window as Mom stirred coffee. Dad read the paper in silence. Lucia's boys watched cartoons too loud in the living room. Do you want me to take you home today? Dad asked, not looking up. My car was parked at the end of the street. No, I said, I feel fine. I'll stay one more day. I shouldn't have stayed. I should have gone home while I still had the strength. By mid-afternoon, the cramps started. At first, I thought it was dehydration or indigestion. Then they came again, lower, sharper. I sat in the bathroom timing them on my phone, 11 minutes apart. Then 9. I texted Lucia. No response. She was helping Mom prep the grill. When I came downstairs pale, holding the stair rail, Mom looked annoyed. Are you okay? She asked, almost out of obligation. I think I'm in early labor. I tried to keep my voice even. Would someone be able to drive me to the ER? I don't think I should go alone. Mom looked at Dad. He looked at the wall. It's not time yet, she said. First babies always take longer. They're 8 minutes apart. She sighed. Lucia and Jeff are here with the boys. You didn't think this through, Monica. We have a full house. We can't all just pick up and leave because of your bad timing. It's not bad timing. It's labor. She looked tired. No, she looked bothered. Finally, Dad stood. Fine. Get your things. I grabbed my overnight bag, the one I packed at week 35 just in case. Toothbrush. Phone charger, baby's first hat. They didn't speak on the drive. The streets blurred past low adobe walls, patches of pink wildflowers, a family riding bikes near the park. No music in the car. No air conditioning. Just silence and the ticking of the turn signal as we neared the hospital. They pulled into the ER drop-off lane. The car didn't stop fully, just coasted to a near halt. I opened the door slowly. And that's when I realized they weren't coming in. I turned around. Wait, can you come with me? Just until I'm checked in. Mom stared straight ahead. Dad's hands tightened on the steering wheel. You made your decision, Monica, she said softly. Now live with it. Then the car pulled away. The automatic doors slid open as I stepped inside. The blast of cool air hit my skin like a wave, sharp against the sweat beating at my neckline. I stood still for a moment, adjusting to the sudden quiet after the gravel crunch and exhaust fumes outside. No one at the front desk. Just a tray of clipboards, a stack of outdated parenting magazines, and a potted plant that looked like it hadn't been watered in weeks. I walked toward the nearest bench. My legs felt shaky, but I didn't want to sit just yet. The pressure in my lower back pulsed in waves. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. I could hear the faint rhythmic beeping of machines from somewhere behind the double doors. And a distant cry, a newborn maybe. I placed one hand on my belly. Almost there, Clara, I whispered. We just need someone to see us. Another contraction crept up from my spine, sharp, deep, like a band tightening around my waist. I grabbed the edge of the reception desk, bent over, slightly breathing through it. That's when I heard footsteps. Steady, slow, purposeful. shoes with soft soles the kind nurses wear during 12-hour shifts. "Ma'am," a voice said, firm but gentle. I looked up. She had kind eyes. Late 40s, early 50s, silver threads in her pulled-back bun, a worn ID badge clipped to her scrub top. "Clara RN. I'm in labor," I managed. "They just left me here." Her eyebrows drew together, but she didn't ask questions. "Let's get you inside," she said, already pressing the elevator button. She didn't offer platitudes. No wide-eyed concern. Just action. Clara guided me to a triage room. I changed into a hospital gown, my hands trembling as I folded my clothes into a chair. The bedsheets smelled of starch and antiseptic. "Safe." She checked my vitals, then gently examined my belly. 7 centimeters, she said quietly. "You're progressing fast." The words struck me harder than expected. No one had touched me with care in weeks. No one had really seen me. "You're doing beautifully, Monica," she said. How did she know my name? Then I saw the sticker on my bag. The nurse had noticed it. Within minutes, a doctor joined us. A young woman with curly hair and quiet hands. They confirmed I was in active labor. I texted Lucia. Nothing. Tried mom voicemail. I thought of calling my friend Tasha from work, but she was on vacation with her wife in Oregon. Nathan, my donor and close friend, had moved to Boston just 3 months ago. He'd offered to be present if I wanted him to, but I had declined. I didn't want confusion. I wanted clarity. Now I wished I'd said yes. Another contraction built, stronger, longer. Clara stood at my side the entire time. She held a cool cloth to my forehead. She adjusted my pillows without being asked. At one point I whimpered, not from the pain but from everything. The rejection, the loneliness. The fact that my daughter's first moments might be shaped by silence, not love. Clara didn't speak. She just held my hand. Her palm was dry, her grip strong. "You're not alone," she said once, and somehow I believed her. Hours passed in blurred rhythms. Pain. Breathing. Pressure. Relief. Repeat. A delivery room. Lights dimmed. A monitor beeping in time with Clara's steady breathing beside me. I reached full dilation just before midnight. The room filled 2 more nurses, the doctor, a warm blanket wrapped around my shoulders. But all I saw was Clara. "Push when you feel ready." The pain was staggering, but familiar. Like my body had known this all along. I pushed, again and again. Tears streamed down the sides of my face, pooling in my ears. A scream tore out of me, not just from labor, but from the months of being unheard. Then, silence. Then a cry. Sharp, clear, alive. Clara handed her to me. A wrinkled, slippery, perfect bundle. Pink skin, downy, dark hair, her mouth seeking something. "She's beautiful," Clara said softly. I couldn't speak. Only nod, only weep. I stared at my daughter's face for the first time. And the first thought I had was this. She made it. Despite everything. She came. They measured her. 6 pounds 11 ounces. 19 inches long. A good, healthy cry. I watched Clara as she cut the umbilical cord with calm, practiced hands. Her wedding band was thin, almost worn smooth. The baby's first blanket was soft blue with yellow stars. Her hat was slightly crooked. I named her Clara Hope Reyes. Right then. No hesitation. She deserved a name born of care. Born of presence. Born of someone who showed up. As I held her swaddled and warm, Clara the nurse cleaned up in the corner. She didn't linger. Didn't ask questions. She just said, "I'll be back to check on you in a bit." Then she slipped out, leaving only the faint scent of citrus hand sanitizer in the air. The room felt still. But I wasn't alone. Clara rested against my chest, her breath shallow and even. I pressed my lips to the top of her head. Her skin smelled like new beginnings. For the first time in months, I felt something settle inside me. It wasn't peace, not yet. But it was a start. They didn't call that night. Not after the baby was born. Not after the nurse filed the intake form. Not even when the hospital sent a generic notification to my emergency contact mom's number. I thought maybe something went wrong. Maybe their phones were off. Maybe they felt ashamed. But by noon the next day, shame had turned to silence. I held Clara against my chest, her head warm and slightly damp from her first sponge bath. Her breath tickled the edge of my collarbone. Outside the window, the New Mexico sky was blinding blue, the kind that made shadows feel sharper. A nurse named Vanessa came in to check my stitches and blood pressure. "You're healing well," she said, smiling. Clara slept through most of it. When she stirred, I reached for the little plastic bassinet and pulled her close again. I couldn't stop looking at her. Around 3 p.m., I tried calling my mother. It rang twice, then went to voicemail. Again. No return text, no knock at the hospital door. Just Clara and me. And a quiet that felt heavier than any pain medication could dull. I remembered something Clara, the nurse, had said in the delivery room when I asked why she'd stayed past her shift. Sometimes you just don't leave people. Simple. Undramatic. True. The irony made my throat tighten. That evening, the hospital social worker came in. A calm woman with soft hands and slow words. She asked about my family. About the drop-off. About my plan when discharged. I tried to laugh, but it sounded more like a cough. "I'll be fine," I said. "They'll come around." She didn't challenge me. Just handed me a small pamphlet about community resources. She lingered a moment longer, eyes flicking toward Clara's crib. "Names matter," she said gently. "Clara's a good one." I nodded. But inside I felt something shifting, something dense and slow and permanent. A realization I hadn't wanted to admit the night before. They weren't going to show up. Not out of guilt, not even out of duty. They had made their decision. And so had I. I was discharged the next morning. The nurse wheeled me to the curb with Clara bundled in my arms. The air smelled like car exhaust and breakfast burritos from the nearby cafe. I stared at the hospital entrance for a moment, memorizing it. It would be part of my daughter's story. Not the ER doors where I'd been dropped off. This one, where we emerged together. I called a rideshare. It arrived 10 minutes later, the driver a kind man named Jorge who didn't ask questions when he saw the newborn. He helped me with the car seat. Helped me into the back. Turned down the radio without being prompted. "You okay back there?" he asked, once after a red light. I nodded. The ride home was quiet. Just the soft rustle of Clara's breath and the occasional ping of a new message from coworkers from the hospital from my insurance app. Nothing from my family. At home, everything looked exactly the same. The couch was still covered in the gray knit throw I'd washed 2 weeks ago. The baby bottle sat sterilized on the counter. Her crib was assembled, lined with sage green sheets I'd picked during a midnight nesting spree. Even the welcome baby balloon my friend Tasha sent was still floating, a little saggy but holding on. I set Clara down in the bassinet and sat at the edge of my bed. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I just breathed. In. Out. Like I had during labor. Like I had when no one answered the phone. I stared at my phone for a long time. Then opened my photos. The first one, me holding Clara just minutes after birth. Hair matted, eyes red, expression raw. But smiling. Really smiling. I sent the photo to Lucia. Then to my mother. Then, after a beat of hesitation, to my father. No caption. Just the image. It felt like handing them a truth they didn't ask for but needed to see. The photo was delivered. Read. No reply. Later that afternoon, the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. I tiptoed over Clara asleep in my arms and peeked through the peephole. A florist van. The man held a small bouquet, pink tulips, white lilies, and baby's breath. "For Monica Reyes," he said when I opened the door. I nodded. The card inside was blank. No signature. No message. Just flowers. I stared at them for a long time. Part of me wanted to believe it was from them. But deep down I knew, if it was them they would have said something. Anything. I placed the flowers on the kitchen table, right next to the breast pump and the unopened stack of birth certificate paperwork. That evening, as the sun dipped below the terracotta rooftops outside my window, I lit a candle. One I'd bought months ago, vanilla cedar. I held Clara close, rocking gently in the chair by the window. "Your name is Clara," I whispered, brushing her tiny cheek. "You're named after someone who stayed. Someone who looked at me and saw a person worth standing next to." Her eyes fluttered open for a moment, blue, curious, ancient. Then closed again. I thought of the baby blanket in the hospital bag I hadn't unpacked yet. Of the tiny bracelet around her wrist. Of the moment I felt her leave my body and enter the world. I would never forget that moment. Not because they weren't there, but because I was. I showed up. 2 days passed, still no word. The flowers wilted slowly on my kitchen table, their petals browning at the edges, curling inward. I didn't throw them out. Not yet. Clara slept beside me in her bassinet, swaddled in the sage-green blanket I'd picked up at Target with Tasha back in March. Her breaths were soft even. I listened to them like music. In those first days, time lost shape. Day bled into night, feedings, burping, diapers. Repeat. The world outside continued spinning, but inside my apartment, everything stood still. The ache in my body dulled, replaced by another kind of ache, one I didn't know how to name. Not grief. Not rage. Something deeper. Disbelief. Not because they had left me, but because it felt so deliberate. On the 4th morning, I woke up to sunlight streaming across Clara's face. She blinked, yawned, then began to fuss softly. I reached for her before she could cry. As I lifted her, my phone buzzed. A message from Lucia. Saw the photo. "She's cute. Congrats, I guess." That was it. No punctuation. No emojis. Just cold clinical indifference wrapped in obligatory civility. I stared at the screen for a long time, then locked it. That afternoon, the story hit the local paper. I hadn't given an interview, but someone at the hospital had leaked a version of it. Pregnant woman abandoned at ER, nurse steps in to deliver baby. There was no name. No photo. Just MR. 38 local healthcare worker. But it didn't take much guessing. Tasha texted me first. "Is that you? Holy hell, Monica. Do you want me to come by?" I told her I was okay, lying maybe. But also not. Clara and I had survived. That had to count for something. Later that evening, my building manager knocked on the door with a small envelope. "No sender," he said, handing it over. Inside was a folded sheet of lined paper, written in Mom's tidy slanted handwriting. "Monica, we saw the article. It's not how we remember things. I hope you and the baby are healthy. Mom." That was it. "No, I'm sorry. No, can we talk? Just not how we remember things." As if it were a matter of memory. As if I had imagined the gravel under my sandals or the click of the door locking behind me. I held Clara that night a little tighter. We sat on the couch, the television playing some nature documentary I wasn't really watching. Her tiny fingers curled around mine. I kissed her forehead and whispered, "They don't get to rewrite this." I knew then what I had to do. Not for revenge. Not even for justice. But for clarity. The next morning, I opened my laptop and began to write. I wrote down everything: the dinner table silences, the removed group chat, the moment they pulled away from the ER. Not to publish. Not to accuse. Just to remember. Accurately. I created a document titled Clara's Beginning. A truth sealed in my own words. Something she could read one day when she asked. Because she would ask. Where was Grandma? Why don't we see Grandpa? And I didn't want to be vague. I didn't want to say, "It's complicated." I wanted to say, "Here is the truth. You were loved, you were chosen, and you were never the problem." A week passed, then another. Clara gained weight. Her cheeks filled out. Her eyes started to follow my movements across the room. We had rhythm now. Morning feedings by the window. Midday naps to the hum of the dishwasher. Evenings wrapped in quiet music and vanilla candlelight. I wasn't lonely, Not exactly. But the absence was loud. Then one night the phone rang. Not a message. Not an email. A call. From Dad. I stared at the screen. It rang 4 times before I answered. His voice was hesitant. Worn. Hi, Monica. I didn't speak. Your mom told me you were home, with the baby. Still, I said nothing. I just wanted to say, I hope you're healing okay. My hand tightened around the phone. Clara stirred in my arms. You left me on the side of the road, Dad. Silence. I know, he said finally. I didn't know what to do. You don't leave someone you love, I whispered. You don't drive away and act like it didn't happen. I'm not proud of it, he said. Your mom was upset. We didn't think. No, I cut him off. You didn't want to think. That's different. Another pause. Can I see her, Clara? His voice cracked a little. I looked down at her face, so peaceful in sleep, so innocent. We'll see, I said. Then I hung up. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel cruel. I just felt calm. I had protected us. For once. And I wasn't going back to being the one who chased, who justified, who made excuses. They had written me out. Now I was writing myself back in on my own terms. The first time I took Clara out by myself, I panicked in the parking lot. The car seat straps wouldn't click right. She kept fussing, red-faced and squirmy in her new lavender onesie. The sun was too bright. My arms felt too weak. I sat in the driver's seat for 10 minutes crying silently. Not from fear, not exactly, but from the weight of everything that came before it. I wasn't just learning how to be a mother. I was learning how to be one without witnesses. Without validation, without applause. The kind of mother who builds everything from scratch, with one hand holding her child and the other shielding them from the people she once called family. Clara was 6 weeks old when the letter came. No return address, but the handwriting was familiar. Lucia's. Monica, I'm not good at saying things out loud, so here I don't know why you chose to do things the way you did. But I also know I wasn't there for you. I should have been. I just didn't know how to explain to Mom that you weren't wrong, you were just brave. If you ever want to talk, I'm here, and if not, I understand. Lucia, I read it twice. Then I folded it, tucked it behind Clara's birth certificate, and didn't reply. Not yet. I had started keeping a list. Not for revenge, not for record-keeping. For protection. Each entry was small, quiet, unassuming. May 28th ER intake form. May 30th nurse Clara's written statement. The 3rd of June. First voicemail from Mom. I didn't raise you to be so dramatic. The 7th of June, anonymous flowers. Still no card. I kept it in a locked folder on my laptop titled Boundary, not because I planned to use it, but because I knew what gaslighting sounded like. And I was never going to doubt my own memory again. Tasha came over one Friday evening with takeout and a big sister vibe I didn't know I needed. She sat at my kitchen island unpacking Thai food while I rocked Clara in the sling. Your parents still quiet? She asked. I nodded. Tasha scoffed. If my mother had done that to me, I would have changed my name and blocked her on every platform. I thought about it, I said. But I want Clara to know who I was, who they were, and why I chose differently. Tasha passed me a container of noodles. You already chose differently. And that's the hardest part. That night after she left, I watched Clara sleep in the soft glow of her nightlight. She had started making tiny cooing noises. The kind that sounded like questions. And I kept answering them in whispers. Yes, you're safe. Yes, I'm here. No, you'll never be second best. By the end of summer, the article had been picked up by a national parenting blog. They changed the headline slightly, left at the ER in labor, a single mom's quiet strength. It was surreal. Hundreds of comments, messages from strangers, offers for interviews. I didn't respond to most of them, but I read every word. Women from Ohio, from Seattle, from Kansas and Georgia. All of them saying the same thing: that was me too. Then came the voicemail from Mom. The one I'll never delete. Monica, I read the article. You made your choice. I still don't agree with it. But if you're open to a conversation, I'd like to meet the baby. Before it's too late. The baby. She still wouldn't say her name. I played the message twice. Then once more. Then put my phone on airplane mode. 2 days later, a letter arrived. Not from my mother. From Nurse Clara. Written in blue ink, slightly tilted script. Monica, I think about you often. I never forgot that night. It reminded me why I went into nursing to begin with. You showed more strength in 12 hours than most people do in a lifetime. I hope your little girl grows up knowing how lucky she is, and I hope you know you didn't just bring a child into the world. You brought yourself through it. With love, Clara. I cried when I read it, not the panicked kind. The kind that releases something you didn't know you were still holding. That weekend, I printed the letter and framed it. I placed it on Clara's bookshelf next to Goodnight Moon and the baby monitor. I made a decision that night. I would no longer wait for permission to live my story, or to rewrite the parts that hurt. I started therapy, signed up for a new mom group, updated my will, and filed a legal statement outlining custodial guardianship, naming Tasha not my family. It wasn't dramatic, it was deliberate. And that's what healing looks like sometimes. Not rage, just paperwork. Quiet, legal, irreversible boundaries. When Clara turned 3 months, I sent a photo to my mother. Clara sitting upright in her bouncer, smiling, with 2 bottom teeth showing, cheeks full and glowing. The message said her name is Clara Hope Reyes. She is happy, she is safe. And she will never wonder if she was wanted. There was no reply. And for the first time, that felt like freedom. Sometimes we forgive because they ask. Sometimes we forgive because we want to be lighter. And sometimes we don't forgive at all. We just move forward. Have you ever had to build peace by walking away from those who broke you? What boundaries did you create to protect your healing? Tell me in the comments. Your story might help someone else begin theirs. You're not alone. And you don't need their permission to reclaim your story. It started with a manila folder. Not flashy. Not dramatic. Just quiet steps printed in black and white. Birth certificate. Custody affidavit. Power of attorney. A notarized letter of intent signed in ink that hadn't yet dried. I kept it in a fireproof lockbox under my bed, not out of paranoia. Out of preparation. Because I knew sooner or later they'd come knocking. Not for me, but for her. The fall came fast in Santa Fe. Crisp air slipped through the window cracks in the morning, curling around Clara's crib like a whisper. I switched her from cotton onesies to fleece sleepers. Made chili instead of salad. Lit candles that smelled like cinnamon and clove instead of vanilla. She was growing. Her giggle had started to develop a choppy, breathy sound that made my ribs ache with joy. She could recognize my voice across the room. She kicked wildly at the sight of her bottle. And one afternoon, while folding laundry, I looked at her and whispered, "You are the best decision I ever made." The first time I let myself imagine confronting them, I didn't picture yelling. I pictured clarity. Me holding Clara. Them sitting stiffly across from me. No apologies, no explanations. Just facts. Just boundaries. Just, this is who I am now, and this is how far you'll stay. It came sooner than I thought. A message from Lucia. Short. Tentative. Mom wants to visit. She's asking. Can I bring her? I stared at the screen for a long time. Not out of shock. Out of calculation. What was this really? Guilt, pressure, a PR move now that the story had spread online? I didn't respond right away. Instead, I opened my laptop and created a new document, if they show up. I listed the rules, no unscheduled visits. Clara is not a photo prop. The past must be acknowledged out loud. One mistake equals the door closes again. I printed it. Posted it on the fridge. Because clarity isn't cruelty, it's protection. I told Lucia they could come the following Sunday. 1 hour. No photos. No, she doesn't remember anyway comments. She replied, understood. That morning I cleaned, but not too much. I didn't want to perform for them. Clara wore a soft cream jumper with tiny embroidered daisies. I wore a sweater with a stain I didn't bother hiding. The doorbell rang at 10:04 a.m. I opened it with Clara on my hip. My mother stood behind Lucia clutching a small white gift bag. Her hair was styled, her lips were painted, her eyes were unreadable. Lucia gave me a faint smile. Hi. I nodded. We didn't hug. Inside they sat on the couch like guests in a waiting room. My mother's eyes darted to the bookshelf, the baby toys, the framed letter from Nurse Clara. Your place is nice, she said. Her voice was tight. Clara made a soft coo, chewing on the corner of her sleeve. She's bigger than I expected, my mom added. She's alert. I didn't respond, didn't offer the baby to her. Didn't offer coffee or tea. I waited. Lucia cleared her throat. Mom wanted to say something. There it was. I looked straight at her. She exhaled through her nose, then set the gift bag on the table. I was raised to believe certain things, she began. That children come from marriage. That families look a certain way. That being different meant being difficult, she swallowed. I thought if I ignored your choices, you'd change your mind. I thought if we showed resistance, you'd fold. But you didn't. Clara squirmed in my arms. I shifted her weight to my other hip. I didn't come to apologize for disagreeing, Mom said carefully. I came to acknowledge I was wrong in how I treated you. That what I did outside that ER wasn't just unkind, it was unforgivable. My throat tightened. Not with emotion. With restraint. I didn't let her off the hook. But I let the words land. I sat down across from her, Clara between us. Her name is Clara Hope Reyes, I said. She was born without any of you. And she'll be raised with or without you too. Mom's eyes filled. Not with tears. With something like understanding. She looks like you, she said softly. The visit lasted exactly 57 minutes. They didn't ask to hold her. They didn't overstay. When they left, I closed the door gently. Then locked it. Not out of fear, out of closure. That night, I opened my boundary folder again. And for the first time, I deleted an entry. Not as a gesture, not as forgiveness, just as proof I was no longer keeping score. I had a plan now. And it didn't require anyone else's permission to move forward. Clara stirred in her sleep. I sat beside her crib, brushing a strand of hair from her brow. You'll know everything, I whispered. You'll know who showed up and who disappeared. You'll know that silence isn't love. That control isn't care. That strength can be soft. I pressed my lips to her temple. And I meant every word. The invitation came printed, not digital. Lucia's son was turning 8. They were planning a backyard party. Piñata, cupcakes, balloons. Family only. And yet it had my name on it. And Clara's. At first I didn't react. Just laid the glossy card on the counter next to the pacifier and a half-peeled banana. Stared at it for an hour. Then longer. They were trying. In their own way. But trying isn't the same as reckoning. And I wasn't going to let Clara be reabsorbed into a family that still hadn't asked her forgiveness for leaving her mother alone in labor. So I made a choice. Not to reject them, not to spite them. But to show them who we were now on our terms. I RSVP'd yes. And then I prepared. Not with confrontation. With clarity. I printed a photo, Clara and me, taken by Tasha, bathed in morning light on my porch. Her first tooth showing, her chubby hand gripping my shirt. I framed it. Wrapped it in brown paper, tied with string. Then I slipped in a letter. Short, pointed. For the ones who once looked away, we're not waiting to be seen anymore. You either choose to show up fully or not at all. But know this, she'll never beg for space at your table. Because she has one of her own. Monica. The party was held at Lucia's place, same yard we'd gathered in so many times growing up. The lemon tree still leaned slightly from that storm when we were 12. The patio furniture was newer, but the porch creaked the same way. Clara wore a navy blue dress with sunflowers stitched across the collar. I dressed simply. No makeup, no armor. As we walked in, heads turned. Some nodded politely. Some blinked then, smiled too wide. Mom stood near the drinks table, plastic cup in hand, sunglasses perched on her hair. Lucia waved. Jeff ushered us to the table where gifts were stacked. I placed ours quietly near the back. Clara clutched her stuffed giraffe and stayed close. No one said the word sorry, not once. But they said she's so big now and she looks just like you, Monica. I smiled, but not because of them, because of her. She moved through the gathering like she belonged, not seeking approval, not shrinking under attention. Just herself. I didn't speak much, didn't need to. But then Mom approached. She held 2 paper plates of cake. One she offered to me silently. I took it. "You've built something really strong here," she said. I looked down at Clara, now trying to feed a strawberry to a baby doll. "I didn't build it for you," I said gently. "I built it to survive you." She swallowed. Then nodded. I know. It wasn't enough. But it was honest. Toward the end of the party, Lucia pulled me aside. "Mom's changed," she said. "Not all the way, but more than I thought she could." "People don't change because we ask them to," I replied. "They change when we stop begging." Lucia looked away. Then handed me a folded piece of paper. She wrote this after the first visit. "I don't know if you want it, but..." I took it unread and placed it in my bag. Not out of resentment. Out of readiness. As we left, I walked Clara past the line of cars. My mother stood at the gate. "I know I don't deserve to ask," she said softly, "but may I send her something once in a while?" I didn't say yes. Didn't say no. Just looked at her, really looked. Not with fury. With distance. "She's not here to heal your guilt," I said. "She's here to live free of it." And I walked away. At home that evening, Clara curled into my side as the sun dipped low. We sat on the floor surrounded by soft blocks and board books. I opened the paper from Lucia. It was Mom's handwriting again. Less precise this time. I didn't know how to accept a daughter who didn't fit the picture I'd clung to for so long. But I see now. The picture was never real. "You are." No signature. Just the words. I didn't call her. Didn't respond. But I placed the note next to Clara's framed photo with the nurse's letter. Not for Mom. For me. For Clara. For the quiet truth of our beginning. Justice hadn't come in the form of lawsuits or headlines. It came in absence. In the space I didn't let them fill. In the moments I no longer gave them access to. In the daughter I protected from patterns I once accepted as normal. This was justice. My child would never wonder if she was wanted. Never ask why she was left behind. She would know she was the beginning of something braver. Clara turned 2 under a cottonwood tree in a local park. The grass was damp with spring, and the wind kept tugging gently at the paper lanterns we'd strung between the branches. Tasha brought lemonade and sun hats for the kids. Lucia showed up quietly, no kids, no Jeff, just herself and a small box wrapped in floral paper. My mother didn't come. She sent a card. I didn't open it. Clara didn't notice. She ran barefoot through the grass, her curls bouncing with each giggle. She chased bubbles like she'd never been chased. Like the world had never left her behind. I watched her, one hand wrapped around a warm paper cup, the other resting against my chest. Inside me, something had shifted, not disappeared. Just settled. After the party, we went home to our little apartment, the one filled with hand-me-downs and thrifted furniture and a wall covered in Clara's finger paintings. She helped me open her gifts. One was a locket from Lucia. Inside, a picture of me holding Clara the day she was born. And a note, "You were never invisible." I cried when Clara wasn't looking. Not because I needed their love anymore, but because I was finally learning how to receive it when it came without conditions. That night, as Clara slept curled into the crook of my arm, I finished a letter I'd been writing for months. Not to my family. To her, my daughter. One day someone might tell you that silence is strength. But I want you to know strength is naming what hurt you and choosing not to carry it forward. You were born from a decision. A fierce, terrifying, beautiful choice. Not everyone understood it. Some never will. But you were always loved. Even when no one stood beside me, I stood for you. The framed letter from Nurse Clara still sits above her bookshelf. Beside it now is a photo of us at the park, Clara in her sunflower dress, hands sticky with frosting, face lit with joy. That's the legacy I've chosen to build. Not of bitterness, not of absence, but of presence. Of showing up especially when it's hard. Especially when you're scared. Especially when no one else does. Sometimes I still hear my mother's voice in my head. Not the cruelest version, the quiet one. Children need order. People talk. Is this really what you wanted? And now I have an answer. Yes. This is what I wanted. Not the struggle, but the freedom that came after. Not the silence, but the clarity that followed it. Not the family I was born into, but the one I'm raising, rooted in truth, grown in light. I no longer wait for apologies. I no longer offer explanations. I live, I raise, I protect. Not just Clara, but the version of myself who almost believed she didn't deserve any of this. If you've ever had to rebuild your sense of worth brick by brick, I see you. If you've ever raised a child or yourself without applause, if you've ever broken a pattern for someone who couldn't speak yet, if you've ever stood in a hospital hallway and whispered, "I'll do this alone," then you know. Justice doesn't always come with punishment. Sometimes it comes with peace. With a locked door. With a child's laughter in a space no one else has the right to ruin. What did you have to leave behind to become the woman you are now? And what legacy are you building in its place? Share it below. There's a reason we tell these stories, not for drama, but for healing. You are not alone. You never were. Every ending can be a new beginning. Subscribe to EN Reddit Story for more true stories of quiet justice, healing, and empowerment after 40. Because every woman deserves to be seen, heard, and remembered.